Welcome to Getting Personal, a monthly podcast diving deep into the stories of the heartbeat of HR. Brought to you by Compt, a global lifestyle benefits platform where companies empower employees with benefits and rewards they'll use and appreciate, whoever and wherever they are in life. Joining me today is Angela Howard, a culture leader and community builder who applies organizational psychology to how we work, lead, and live. She's the founder of Call for Culture, where she brings people together to help workplaces better reflect the world we are actually living in. Welcome, Angela.
Thank you, Lauren. So good to be here. Appreciate you.
Thanks. So before we get into the work and the conference, which is very exciting, I just want to ask, how are you actually arriving to this conversation today? Because it's 2026, and I don't think any of us have eased into this year.
Yeah, 2025. I mean, I just feel like every year we're like, the previous year was rough. It was rough. It's gonna be a new day. And so I feel you. I feel that in my bones. But I think that we are at a stage where we have many multiple forces, I think, happening at one time. I firmly believe we're in a kind of version of a work revolution that we haven't seen probably since the Industrial Revolution. There
Ooh.
are changes with the social contract when it comes to employers and employees. That is very visible in the digital age of everything being shared and visibility being super high, accountability being super high. So I also believe that we have multiple generations who are pushing back on things that honestly I think we've been pushing back since the labor movement, and it's just continuing and it's come to a head. I think COVID, the administration, a lot of the work around DEI has brought these multiple forces together. And so we are at a point where I think there's going to be some real change and shifts happening. And right now we're kind of in the messy middle of tension.
Yeah.
Um, One of the things that I point to a lot is the return to office movement, because that is like a little microcosm of I think of some of the tension and the behavior we're seeing as a part of all these social changes that are happening.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
I also see the I don't know what I want to say. The influence that everyone has on each other now,
Mm.
since we are so visible, so connected to one another, where if you have a certain viewpoint of the workplace and what culture should look like, or what you're experiencing, whether that's good or bad,
Mhm.
it becomes amplified. And I think, like you said, it's really coming to a head.
Mm. Absolutely. Yeah, and I think one of the things that we don't recognize enough is that if it's happening in the world, it's happening at work.
Yeah.
And for so long, the norm has been keep social issues and politics out of the workplace. Never the two shall meet. And now we're recognizing that, yeah, humans, when they come into work, they come with backgrounds and perspectives and issues that they care about and that are real, really real to them in their day-to-day lives. You can't separate that from the work. And that was really kind of what social impact work, DEI work was about. And right now that's kind of a dirty word, right? So we're kind of in this interesting flux and tension with that too.
Did you see a lot of these topics coming up at Call for Culture at the conference last year? And remind me
Yeah.
when that was and what it looked like, especially for people who have maybe never heard of it, but would absolutely
Yeah.
benefit from it.
Yeah, so a little bit of context and background. So, the way that the Call for Culture, the Culture Impact Lab, has come to be is essentially I was working as a speaker in a lot of the conference circuits. I was always at these events where we were talking about workplace and social issues, social impact, DEI was always like a topic or two.
Yeah.
There was kind of like this little pocket of space to talk about some of these issues that are impacting the workplace and to honestly future ready organizations for what's to come. Instead, we were talking about things that we've been talking about year after year, day after day, and it's comfortable, right? Things like engagement surveys and employee engagement, and those things are comfortable because we feel like we're chipping away at something internally within the
Sure.
workplace, when in reality, there is this larger force of issues that are impacting the weather, really, when it comes to culture and climate within the workplace. So I was finding there were no conferences, or there were very few that I found that really intersected this idea of workplace and social change.
Hmm.
And so the Culture Impact Lab is essentially all of our topics are at that intersection. So, so we're talking about, when it comes to broader social issues like climate change, like DEI, like well-being and mental health, how is that impacting the tectonic shift of workplace culture?
Hmm.
Not just the ping pong tables or whether we're implementing a DEI strategy. It's really like, how is this going to change the way we look at work as we know it socially? And so that's a very different perspective. And, our audience is typically people who work in workplace culture, but we also have a lot of just change makers, change leaders who are working in other types of organizations like government, and, are working on their community building, nonprofits, philanthropic organizations who have a social impact lens. So last year was wonderful. We had, um, lots of themes around AI, for
Yeah.
example, which everyone is talking about, but from the standpoint of social responsibility, how do we capture this moment and embrace it, and also recognize there are gaps that we need to be at the forefront of. So those are the types of issues we're talking about for the 2 days.
Sure.
And when people come to the conference, we call it a lab. I mean, it's a conference, but we call it a lab because people come with a very specific challenge statement. So
Hmm.
before they even step in the room, probably the 2 months before, we're prepping them with a lab challenge statement. And that lab challenge statement is something they're working over the 2 days, and they leave with an action plan. So
Oh, I
our
love
goal
that.
is to mobilize, not just speak on topics. We actually want to mobilize a small group of 100 people to go out into the world and create change.
I love that. That is so much more collaborative and less
Hmm.
of the traditional conference. Here are some people on a stage who are going to be talking at you,
Yes.
even if they have lived a challenge, figured out a solution to that challenge. That's great for them in that scenario, in that context.
Yeah,
But that
sure.
might not actually help you with what you're trying to overcome within your organization. So this is really
Mhm.
interesting. I love this approach.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. We love it too.
So, was there a moment in particular over the course of those 2 days, or maybe it was a few moments, that you keep coming back to as you sit and reflect and also build for what you would like to accomplish in 2026?
Yeah, we had a speaker who talked about AI as a tool for um, kind of like building a collective brain trust
Hmm.
around, one, like building businesses and getting people on the same page around a particular issue or topic. Um, or two, that could be used within organizations to bring together the brain trust of an organization
Right.
around decisions and issues. And a lot of times I think we think about the workplace as like, we have this leadership up here, they're making all these decisions in a boardroom, that gets trickled down, and that's where things get hairy, right? Because
Yeah.
change management. And so how can we use AI to kind of take hold of the brain trust of the organization and do a bottom up approach,
Yeah.
if it makes sense. The people close to the issues have the solutions. And so that was a really great defining moment. And it also just speaks to how humans operate, right? If we're a part of the solution, we're more than likely to get behind it. The mobilization behind that solution is quicker. So that was a really powerful session. And then we had a session around is DEI. We actually, it was positioned as a almost like a funeral to DEI,
Oh no,
which
but
was it's and
accurate.
It was actually a eulogy. One of the speakers did a eulogy to DEI, but it was really meant to, in that moment, collectively understand what we're leaving behind, what
Yeah.
needs to die, the performativeness of DEI, not even, people weaponizing the letters itself, or,
Hmm.
what needs to die with DEI, and how can we collectively capture this moment to make sure that whatever we're building next is going to have the impact we want it to have. And we have the right people in the room to do that. So this idea of a eulogy to DEI was really just timely. And that's really what we want to do each year is we want to meet a moment. So
Yeah.
rather than thinking about like topics, I mean, we definitely want evergreen topics, but we balance that with like what's the issue we're dealing with this year? How is that going to relate? And that's why the lab challenge statements are so important because we can look at those beforehand and understand the issues that our participants are challenged with and actually have content and facilitation that guides them through that.
Sure. Those moments and however many others, I imagine have stuck with not just you, but the people who attended as well. And
Mhm.
also probably sparked some interesting conversations there and ongoing ones after. I'm wondering, when you think about those, was there like a recurring theme or something that still stuck with you that you've understood like, wow, this is what people need from work right now. This is what they need from their workplaces, from their coworkers, from their lives, especially because we
Mhm.
know that lives and work, the personal and professional, are so intertwined.
Yeah, I think there's a collective burnout happening right now.
Yeah.
There's a collective sense of disconnection on many different fronts, right? One, we are, as much as I'm all about hybrid and remote work. And the challenge is we haven't built the behavior and the infrastructure. Like the workplace is based on butts and seats, right? That's how
Yeah.
we developed our processes. Leaders are, if, I mean, remote work really heightened the shitty leader, right? Because they weren't able to actually connect with their people unless they had butts and seats, if that, right? So
Right.
we had a lot of just things that have come to light as far as these different ways of working. So I think connection has been lost.
Mm.
People are craving a refuge, I think, when it comes to community. And
Yeah.
that's why we built the lab as well, because we have all these people who are, like some of your listeners, like we are in the business of change. We're looking
Hmm.
to create a workplace that people have been asking for decades, and it looks different throughout time, right? But we're looking to build an organization, build workplaces that have dignity and respect and basic human needs met, that focus on well-being, and think about the whole human. And a lot of people think about that as like a generational change, but I would argue that I guess one of the themes that has come up in the conference is this is something we've been asking for since the labor movement, right?
Yeah.
We've just been calling it something different. And it kind of drives me a little nutty when I see headlines like the Great Resignation and quiet
Yeah.
quitting, and it's noise,
Hmm.
and people are reacting to the noise, and they're capitalizing on the noise, and they're creating solutions for the noise. But the thing about the conference is we kind of get back to basics, like
Yeah.
how do we create more dignity within organizations? How do we look at issues like equal pay? And why are we still struggling with equal pay? And these are things that we need the soil to be right. And I think we end up in this field very distracted for the next trend or the next thing, when in reality we should be focused on like a few things that are really fundamental to the human experience.
Do you think that's maybe influenced by just the noise being so loud and that people, especially employees, are demanding whatever new headline that they're reading?
Hmm.
And the change makers in organizations, whether that's HR, whether that's middle management, whether
Hmm.
whoever it is,
are feeling pressured to answer that specifically when you only have so much time, and it can be really hard to foundationally change a workplace.
Yes. Yeah, you bring up a great point. I think there's many different like avatars that I'm thinking about within a workplace, right? Like you've got middle management, and I feel for middle management because they are at this messy middle of like they can't quite they can try really hard to create systems change, but it's really tough because maybe I'm one manager who has a team and I really want to advocate for them, but I'm managing up, I'm managing down, I'm exhausted, I'm burnt out. So we try to work with that leader to understand what's within your control
Sure.
and what are the resources the organization is providing and what kind of experience can you create, because at the end of the day the perks are not going to make the experience.
Mhm.
It is the micro moments, how you're treated during really vulnerable times in your life and at work. It's about um leaders being humble and apologizing when they effed up.
Yep.
It's like these little micro moments that don't require a perk or
Yeah.
monetary. It's all about treatment and fairness. And do I feel like I matter here? And I think that, and again, if we can just get people focused on that fundamentally and creating that equity for people, because I do think this is about equity, right? I think
Yeah.
equity is kind of a dirty word, but when we talk about equity, all we're saying is, hey, I know you well enough to know what you need to be successful.
Hmm.
And that might look different for you than it does for me, than it does for another person. And that might mean spending a little bit more time with you, or that might mean when your cat is sick and at the vet, I send you a little, kind of care package because I know that's important to you.
Yeah.
That's what equity is. And people are just like we're almost like seeing red
Yeah.
when we're hearing these very like human terms that have been weaponized throughout the course of the last few years. Um, I also think the idea of like choice,
Hmm.
right? I think
Mhm.
humans, adults like the idea of choice. And so, how can you create systems of choice where, um, yes, we have policies, we have processes, but from an experience perspective, how do I feel like you're personalizing the experience to me?
Yeah.
So, I think these are just some things that an individual middle manager, can use to really create the experience for their team. But at the end of the day, we do need systems change. We
Yeah.
need these philosophies, these behaviors to be systematic for the culture of the organization to shift. And that's the trickiest part. And that's, that's why some of us are, like myself, are in the business of culture change. And it is an art and a science and a balance of shifting the Titanic of what workplace was built on, which was a little bit of exploitation, a lot of bit of exploitation, widgets and machinery and processing lines to actually we're all humans and we need to think about the human experience. So I don't know if that answered your question, but I think there's kind of two layers to that.
Yeah, I especially like that you brought up choice. I mean, of course I do, based on what we do at Compt. Hello.
Yeah. Yes.
But I also like it from the perspective of just myself as an employee, as an
Mhm.
adult, as someone who, when so many things feel out of our control,
Mm.
having even just the ability to make a micro choice within your life, whether that's I'm going to eat this for lunch today, or I'm going to take advantage of this benefit at work, or I'm going to show up in this kind of way in our meeting today, gives you like a sense of control that we don't otherwise have. Maybe. Um, I'm so glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, it's and again, it's going back to these basics. And a lot of this is around when we work with clients, for example, it's really centered on leadership and the collective body of leadership and how they're behaving and how they're mirroring culture. And it's hard, right? Because when you have an organization of, I don't know, 100 plus leaders, they're all coming with bias, perspective of what leadership should be. Oftentimes, those people get promoted because they're good technical experts, not leaders.
Mm.
Um, and we don't see in this country, at least, we don't see leaders oftentimes as like I see leaders as caretakers
Mm-hmm.
in a way. Like you have people under your care, and you either choose to be a leader, where you choose to have the conversations and to nourish and nurture the people in your care, or you see them as widgets and you see them as a means to an end and work that needs to be done. And that's called management. That's like a glorified project manager.
Yeah.
So there's a whole another set of skills that you need for people leadership. And those, take on skills that we're not taught in an MBA course. We're not taught empathy in school. We're not taught these things. And so I think a leadership development is a really important element, and aligning leaders to the behaviors and the values of the organization.
Yeah. Especially in a world where everything feels so transactional. And that's kind of how you are taught to approach the workplace. So
Yes,
everyone is always about me, and how do I climb the ladder instead of how do I grab the hands of the people around me and we all climb this thing together.
exactly. Yes, yes. And the challenge is the reason why we don't do that is because it takes time.
Yeah.
And we are very focused on KPIs that are leading and not lagging.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where, when we talk about like future readying an organization, this is what I fear the most is we are running on systems and hardware that's not going to work for the pace of change happening socially because
Yeah.
we are not willing to take a step back and fix the foundational things, and it's going to spin out of control. And that's what I think we're seeing is it's coming to a head. People are like, no more. I'm not burning. COVID taught me that I'm not going to burn myself out. I'm not going to, I got too close to death to COVID, too close to mortality conversations to
Yeah.
be like, yeah, work is everything for me. No, I want to live life and work is a part of that. And I think the more that we can establish and recognize that a workplace at its core is it's a partnership between an employer and employee. The challenge we've had is historically the employer has a power um, there's a power over
Mm-hmm.
mentality and culture. And what the reason why employers get nervous when the power dynamic evens out is because they liked that position.
Yeah.
I mean, they had control, right? And so when people
Mm-hmm.
are like, no, that doesn't work for me, the partnership doesn't work for me anymore, the agreement doesn't work for me, the social contract doesn't work for me, now I'm getting nervous because now I'm like, oh, I can't exploit the situation. I can't make the call. I have to collaborate with somebody who might be a production worker, right? Or,
Upsets
might.
the organizational pyramid.
Right, exactly. Might be an admin assistant.
Uh-huh.
And so there's a power difference. And what you notice is, I think, during these times of social change where people are questioning or asking for more or asking for progress, the power dynamic shifts when the movement happens, when
Mm-hmm.
the workforce in general is like, yeah, no more. And you see in the economy and the market, you can see that actually play out. And employers, leaders don't like that because that hasn't been the traditional power structure. So I wish we would all collectively just like come to an agreement, that there needs to be some leveling out of that power in order for this to work in the future.
So, how does all of that then influence the theme for the 2026 lab? I saw that it's enduring futures, and I feel like that is exactly what we're talking about here. Um, the future of work, separately endurance, because we're also burned out.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
tell me about it. When did that phrase also first feel true for you when you were brainstorming? What does next year look like?
Yeah, well, each year we kind of we talk to the community. We say, "Hey, what is on your mind? What is at top of mind for you personally, professionally, in the work that you do?" Many of the people who join our conference, it's tough because there is no distinction between their work and their personal values. So, it's kind of, one of the things that I've recognized is the space that we've created is again meant to be a refuge for people who are constantly bumping up against the status quo and are trying to create change in the workplace and change in their spheres of influence.
Sure.
So enduring futures is, I mean, the enduring part is, imagine a space where you're with people who are values aligned and you don't feel like you have to prove and overperform, and like you're taking this as almost like a retreat for you to recharge and reconnect
Hmm.
to who you are, why you do this work. You're re-energizing yourself.
Yeah.
And so that is one big part of the conference actually every year, is we want to create that space. The second piece, Enduring Futures, is really about how do we collectively think about the future of work in the context of meeting the moment of the social issues that are happening. How do we get to the meat of issues? Again, like, I don't want to be talking about engagement surveys without the context of, there's a power dynamic shift that's happening between employers and employees. The economy is horrible right now, and so people are in survival mode, and that is impacting how they're thinking about work. I don't want to have the singular conversations. I want to have the broad, root-based conversations.
Right.
So I think the enduring futures is like, let's get to the bottom of it so that we can chip away at it and change it. And we won't change it in a year. Um, and then I think some of the three kind of pillars is around plural voices. Um, so how do you, within an organization, bring together different beliefs, perspectives, political leanings, conversations? How do we equip you with the tools to do that?
Yeah.
Well-being is a huge theme every year. I feel like for the last 3 years. Um, AI and climate change are two like larger world scale issues that we're going to be tackling and talking about. Um, and then also, again, focusing on just the space being a refuge for people. So focusing on somatic movement and, making sure that we're kind of pouring into people as a part of these sessions. And again, people bring their lab challenge statement, so everyone's going to have a different lens as to which they're viewing the speakers and the workshops, and leading with an action plan.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That I imagine will be just a really interesting lab this year, especially because there's
Yeah.
so much to consider in the greater climate and how it impacts work and how it impacts us personally. One thing that you had mentioned earlier, and I was thinking about it as you were talking about the people who come to this lab being leaders and change makers, is the difference between leaders and management. And
Mm.
the very just there's a nuance there. And I imagine that this is a conversation that also just kind of naturally comes up when everyone is together for these 2 days.
Mhm.
But where do you see leaders getting stuck right now, even when their intentions are good? Because maybe this goes beyond what they come to the conference with, trying to figure out, like, this is what I'm going to solve, but maybe there's something else going on.
Yeah, I think leaders are struggling with this idea of plural voices, shared values.
Mm,
When you work at an organization as a leader, you're balancing your own personal values, the values of the company, the shifts, the evolution that is happening with the culture. You're dealing with your team, your leaders. So I think this idea of, again, managing multiple stakeholders
yeah.
and having empathy for each set of and understanding even where the lines cross between stakeholders. Change management is huge. It's a huge gap. Even some of the best leaders that I know struggle with okay, we're working towards a change, which we always are. I mean, at
Right.
this point, it would be hard for us to talk to a leader and be like, yeah, we're stabilized, status quo. Um, Everyone's dealing with change, and the speed of change is so rapid, and being able to say this stakeholder group needs something different than this stakeholder group, and I need something different. How do I balance that with my
Yeah.
own well-being? So that is enduring futures, right? Like, how do you maintain your own resilience? And I don't love that word resilience because it's kind of weaponized, but truly,
Right.
how do you maintain your sustainability um, as a leader who needs to be selfless every day? Like, the whole definition of leadership
It's
is
tough.
selflessness,
Yeah.
and you have to take care of yourself to make sure you can pour into others. So
Hmm.
that and then on top of the volatility of change and the amount of pivoting leaders are having to do outside of the traditional realms of maybe what they've been taught within the workplace and balancing emotions, right?
Hmm.
Balancing issues that people are bringing to the workplace. I'll tell you, for example, I live in Chicago. We are having there's a ton of social change, social issues happening within Chicago around ICE.
Yeah.
I have friends who have parents who will not leave the house because, so there's like, how do you ignore that? If
Hmm.
you're a Chicago-based workplace, people are being snatched from their homes. Those people work for you or have parents who are directly impacted by this. How do you have that conversation? And how do you protect people? How do you use your values to reflect protecting people? And is that the role of the workplace, right? Like, that's the other conversation that's happening is that my role? Is that my responsibility? Um, so these are conversations we just, again, because we've kept things so separate, we're not comfortable having. So that's another big, I think, theme that I'm seeing with leaders.
So we've talked a lot about like collective direction, themes that you're seeing with leaders, but what about maybe like a personal theme that you're carrying into this year? Maybe that influences some of the work that you're doing.
Yeah, my own theme going into 2026 is I had a very transformative year. 2025 was, I think, transformative for everybody. I mean, everybody's like emerging from that, I think, a little different, maybe. But I've had quite a bit of transformation in my own life. So a lot of change management in my own life.
Right.
Um, I think that's what I'm honestly focusing on. And this has been a struggle for me because I'm a person who, when it comes to the workplace and the work that we do day in and day out, it's very hard to not think about politics and to not think
Yeah.
about the world around us. And I felt pretty overwhelmed by that in 2025 because I had my own
Mhm.
kind of personal transformation happening, but also now I have to save the world. Like in your mind, like
Yeah.
what can I do to make things better? And so my theme has been local community. What can I do within my neighborhood, within my block, the people that I know,
Yeah.
to collectively care for them? And this is, again, we think about the workplace, but also like the community you live in is kind of a similar ecosystem,
Right.
right? And so I've been trying to apply some of those tactics to the way that I serve my community. And it could be as simple as like, I have a friend who she's a speaker, but she does work specifically around workplace culture and hospitality, and she's doing amazing work. And she's like, Angela, I need someone to watch my dog for the weekend. I need to go to Brooklyn to talk to these group of restaurant owners about workplace culture, and like, I need help. And I'm like, yes, I will dog sit for you for 2 days. And you know
Yeah.
what? That is enabling somebody to do the great work they do. So, like, I'm trying to really, even though I have big aspirations and plans and things that I want to do, I'm really trying to hone in on what can I do every day to just serve my community locally.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to save the world, but how can I help 1 to 2 people a week? How can I
Yeah.
volunteer? We did a toy drive in Pilsen, which in a neighborhood here in Chicago that's been hit quite heavily by the ice raids. And so bringing joy in from that perspective. So narrowing in locally, what can I do? What can I control to create change?
Yeah, I think a lot of people have this maybe perception that showing up in small ways isn't enough, where you're showing up in a small way for like your neighbor in
Mhm.
you're bringing someone a cup of sugar, whatever
Yeah,
that looks
yeah,
like, and
yes.
it's sustainable for you because we can only maybe add so many things to our plate right now, if we're trying to protect our own well-being, our mental health. So it can almost feel like, oh, well, I could do more and I wish I could do more. But sometimes those little things are so much to other people. So you shouldn't be
Mm.
deterred from doing something, even if your perception of it is that, oh, it's small, it's nothing. It could be everything.
Yeah, and that's I think we need to apply that to the workplace as well, is, every moment is an opportunity to influence in a positive way. And that's what leadership is. I think we think about leadership as like a position. Leadership is not that. I mean, the position, maybe gives you the title of leader, but leading is a behavior that all of us can do. And
Yeah.
you either make a decision to lead or to take a back seat. And any of us can do that. You don't need the title, you don't need the position. You just need kind of the pause and the willingness to say, I'm going to positively influence this person today, or, I'm going to choose something different. Another thing that I've been really, a theme for me has been staying true, doubling down and staying true to myself and not letting outside forces um, jerk my nervous system around to the point
Yeah.
of, acting or behaving differently or giving into values that don't align with me. So that's also leadership, right? Self-leadership.
Yeah.
Being able to regulate our emotions and say, like, I am going to lead with love. I'm going to lead with um, human centricity. I'm going to lead with humanity. And I'm not going to let these outside forces infiltrate that. So that's been another theme. And I think a lot of our participants in the conference are probably thinking the same thing.
It makes a lot of sense, especially when you just think about the core similarities between people leaders and the empathy and the
Yes.
humanity.
Yes.
And for those people who are maybe existing right now on a scale of tired to exasperated, but are still deeply committed to the work of culture, what would you want to say to them right now?
The thing I really want to say is keep going, but that feels empty because
Right.
it's like, sure, funny that you say that. I can't keep going, actually. I would actually say pause. I would actually almost go the opposite direction. We are in a position right now of it's a new year. Socially, we've accepted that we're supposed to just jump into things and, like go hard and do the work. I would take some time to reflect. One of the reasons why we have the conference in the springtime is because truly that feels like an opportunity of renewal. And I've been trying to shift my calendar a little bit to say, you know what? December through March is reflection. It's taking a step back. It's doing less. It's cold in Chicago. Like
Yeah.
hibernate a little bit. I saw a quote the other day and I can't remember, but it was like basically saying that there's a difference between like there's seasons of being rooted and there's seasons of like flowering, right?
Ah,
Like
yeah.
and we have to balance those things. So this is like my rooted season and I think that season is really important and for you to create the soil to then create you know, opportunities and flowers and seeds and all the things if we're using the, the gardening analogy. So take a step back, root yourself, take the time to do that and build that into your cycle. Maybe it's not December through March. Maybe it's in the heat of the summer. I don't know, but finding time to root versus to always focus on productivity and doing all the things. We can learn a lot from, I think, pausing and taking a step back.
That's really beautiful. Angela, thank you for sharing all of your insights with me today.
Thank you. So happy to be here, and thanks for having me on.
Thanks for joining us on Getting Personal, brought to you by lifestyle benefits experts at Compt. Remember, you can always find more stories and helpful insights on our LinkedIn and blog.